Okay, so we are reading Aghora, the left hand of God. We are on page 237 of the book, chapter 9, and we are on page number 121 of the PDF.
Chapter 9, Sex. I have always maintained that there are two parts of the body which move even though they have no bone to support them: the tongue and the penis or clitoris. These organs are made to move by the ego alone. They can take you to the heights of success if they are controlled and if they are misused. If you make just a single mistake in your sadhana, down you go, dive bombing like a spook. Man and woman. I am afraid that nowadays most people don't understand the natural differences between the sexes as well as they should. This is why there is so much misunderstanding between men and women, and why men have become so passive and women so aggressive.
So again,
Ultimately,
this is very important. Okay, the man. Just one second. Okay, so there are certain characteristics that a man has, and there are certain characteristics the woman has. What has started happening now is that the woman wants to do the man's job and expects the man to do the woman's job. So this is becoming a huge problem as far as a lot of stuff in the world is concerned. Okay, and I'm not being sexist or anything over here. What this is what it actually is. And in the first paragraph, they said the two organs without the bone, that is something which leads you into stuff that you do not want to actually be led into.
ultimately, no doubt there is no such thing as gender. In fact, I always had the desire to fill a room full of skeletons. One would be lying on atop another, as if copulating. One would be holding a skull as if contemplating it, and so on. When anyone came to me to ask after spiritual knowledge, I would show them this room. Then I would see, do you see those two skeletons over there? That is what you look like when you are making love. There is no gender. Gender was created by nature for her own purposes. Copulation is due to rin anubandhan, the bondage of karmic debt. As long as we exist in the world, we are enmeshed in duality. For worldly purposes, we have to consider gender. Until you can go beyond your body completely, your gender will exert its effect on you. So I don't think there is any use in trying to avoid gender differences or pretending they don't exist. You have to know a thing before you can go beyond it.
Okay.
Men are creatures of ambition and women are creatures of emotion. Yes, women can have ambition, and yes, men can have emotion. But only a woman can be overwhelmed by emotion, which is why she can succeed at achieving emotional ecstasies fairly easily. A man must encounter plenty of obstacles before he can enter emotional highlights. He has to work hard to develop such extreme emotion. Of course, men are better than women on the path of gyan or knowledge. Rarely can a woman develop good gyan. Why? Because she is the very embodiment of Shakti.
Okay, so one second now. So in the world that we exist, we are enmeshed in duality. So we are constantly enmeshed in duality. This and that, he and me, she and he. So we are constantly enmeshed in duality. At the end of the day, why are we here? We are here to transcend duality. And in the beginning, it says in the previous paragraph, there is no gender. Gender was created by nature for its own purpose. So ultimately, it's the Ardhanareshwari concept where there is no gender. Okay. This is also the reason why the coconut is revered so much. The coconut has no gender. There is no fertilization process as far as the coconut is concerned. It is, I think, the only fruit that does not have any fertilization process. It grows on its own. You want to grow a coconut plant, you need to just plant the coconut and the coconut plant will grow from there. The other thing it's saying men are creatures of ambition and women are creatures of emotion. So men used to actually go out and earn the daily bread, right? They used to go hunting in the hunting gatherers also. The women used to look after the children. So they were creatures of emotion and men were creatures of ambition, of growth, right? Now what is happening is women are becoming creatures of ambition and men are becoming creatures of emotion, which is actually creating a little bit of a counterbalance over here. The other thing he also says over here, the man always needs a challenge to become emotionally high about something. The woman does not need that. The woman can get emotionally high very easily compared to the man. And the reason for this is that the man can develop gyan, but the woman is the embodiment of Shakti. That is the energy which drives the man, right? So the saying that there is a woman behind every man who is successful is because of this, because the woman is the Shakti. If the woman keeps undermining the man can never grow.
Now I know you can argue that men are also the embodiment of Shakti because the entire manifested universe is nothing but Shakti. But then the entire universe is all the creation of Shiva as well. Both men and women possess attributes of both Shiva and Shakti, but in different measure. The chief characteristic of Shakti is that she is kinetic, she moves. And this is the chief characteristic of a woman, that she is changeable. Some call her fickle. Shiva's chief characteristic is his immobility. Likewise, a man is or should be firm. Often he is unyielding. Women have to learn firmness, men have to learn emotion. The universe cannot exist if either the male or female principles ceases to exist. There is no way to determine whether men are greater or women are greater. Both of them are. That's all.
So over here, it says very clearly, the chief characteristic of Shakti is that she is kinetic. She moves. So there are two kinds of energy. There is kinetic energy and there is potential energy. So kinetic energy is like steam and potential energy is coal, right? So the coal has the potential to create steam, but the steam can drive things. The coal itself cannot drive things. So always there is an interchange between kinetic and potential energy. So Shiv is the potential energy and Shakti is the kinetic energy.
Once the Adya Shakti said to Lord Shiv, "Ha, who do you think you are? Without me, you are nothing." Shiv smiled his deep secret smile and said in reply, "Be calm, my dear. Remember, I gave you birth. Your very existence is due to me. Consider something else. Women are meant to be more closely bound to the world than are men. Only a woman can give birth. What is birth? It is the process of taking a spirit and enmeshing it in physical existence. A woman's job is to clothe spirit in matter. This is why traditionally in Vedic times, women were supposed to look after the home and the mundane side of existence while their men went out and did rituals and provided for the family's spiritual advancement. The man never had to worry about providing for his physical necessities, so he would be free to spiritualize himself to the maximum. The woman never had to worry about tough penances and other spiritual practices because whatever penance her man did automatically came in some measure to her. Now things have changed. It is hard for a woman to find a good man. I don't deny it. And if she can't find a good man, then she has to try to do sadhana on her own. It's only reasonable, but it is not the ideal situation.
So again over here, the woman was meant to look after the day-to-day needs, and the man had to go out and do the austerities or gather the food or whatever penance or actions that the man had to take, right? So, and whatever the man did, a portion of it automatically came to the woman. But what the woman does not go to the man. That is what is said as per the Vedic tradition. But now, of course, the men are converting into another way. So the women also have to start doing the things that the men had to do.
Even physically, we can find evidence of this truth. Consider the vagina, a hollow organ. Hollow means empty. A woman has a very basic emptiness which she is always trying to fill and which can best be filled by a man. A man has a solid, firm penis which is always on the lookout for emptiness which can be filled. The vagina is an expansile organ. It can change size to fit any penis. The penis does not change size to fit the vagina. Remember, it is the vagina that makes the adjustment and clutches the penis tightly, just as the proton is enveloped by the cloud of electrons which whirl about it, just as Shiva is encompassed by Shakti. Even so is a man surrounded by his woman physically and mentally.
So the Shakti is behind the man, okay, and affects the man physically and mentally.
This fact makes women more superficial than men. I know that this statement will offend many self professed feminists. But look at the vagina again. Is it not superficial to the penis? Does it not cover as its function? Is not the penis central, the thing covered? Shiva is impulse. Shakti is that which limits the impulse. Is not the limit superficial to the thing limited? There is nothing wrong per se with being superficial. It has its benefits and its drawbacks, like everything else in the universe. If Shakti was not superficial, then Maya, Shakti's skin, would not exist and the universe could not hold together. And then none of us would exist. Which is why I worship Ma. But it is necessary to call a spade a spade. Our Vedic religion made a thorough study of this whole business of female duality. Remember, the Vedas never discriminated against women. The discrimination came much later. Many of our great sages were women, like Lopamudra and Gargi. All of our rishis were married householders. As I said before, in an ideal Vedic marriage, the husband exists to provide stability and direction, while the wife sees to the details. In music, the rhythm, Shiva, provides the stability, and the tune, Shakti, provides the ornamentation. It is a partnership, a mutual thing. You can't have one without the other. Our scriptures describe in detail the qualities of a good wife. When her husband is troubled or tired or fed up with life or needs advice, she is friend, companion, and advisor. In his work, she shoulders part of his load as a servant would. She shares his karmas with him. When she feeds him and cares for him, when he is ill, a wife must mother her husband. And finally, Shayaneshu Rambha. In bed, she should be as passionate as Rambha, the most sensuous of the dancing girls in the court of Indra, king of the gods. In fact, she has the right to demand that her husband satisfy her sexually. Most important, a good wife will always encourage her man to do his sadhana, since he is doing it for her also. They have become two parts of the same being. Never forget that sadhana is possible only when your domestic life is stable. As the great saint Tukaram said, Pahle pothoba nantar vithoba, meaning that you should first make sure that your belly has been satisfied and only then think about going out to search for God.
So it's very clear you cannot do spirituality and spiritual sadhanas on an empty stomach. So your survival needs to be taken care of, and only after that you can actually do spiritual austerities and sadhana.
If a man and a woman can cooperate like this, then the sky is the limit for what they can achieve together. I once told this to an American couple whom I treat as my spiritual children. The lady told me, "This is all about a good wife. Didn't anyone in India ever bother to consider what makes a good husband?" She was right, of course. She had every right to demand, to know. I told her, a good husband does all he can to satisfy his wife's desires, beginning with sex. He must not fail to satiate her with sex. Our ancient scriptures even mention this. In one of them, Parvati, Shiva's wife, says, "Among all the pleasures of women, the greatest pleasure is to unite with a good man in private, and the misery which arises from its interruption is not equaled by any other." A man's enjoyment in sex and in family life in general is meant to consist of the satisfaction he obtains from being able to satisfy his family's desires. If his woman is a good wife, all her desires will benefit him directly or indirectly anyway. So he is not losing anything. It is a mutual benefit, an attempt on the part of both to do the best they can for each other. Of course, nowadays such well balanced couples are so rare as to be almost non existent. And this is all because men and women no longer know who they are and what they are supposed to do. Every woman has within her a measure of the original Shakti, but very few women know their own capabilities, all because of the heavy overlay of karmas which obscures their perception. A woman who learns her capabilities as an embodied Shakti, well, she becomes someone. And this goes for men too. Deep down inside, they have a spark of the divine Shiva. Unfortunately, most humans perceive things so dimly that women interpret the Shakti they feel as a need to smother their men, and men feel just sufficient forces of Shiva to make them think they need to dominate women without knowing how to control them. Control of a woman can never be by force, which produces too many deleterious effects. Control must always be by love alone if it is to be effective. How many men know how to control a woman today? Even a handful? Ha! Remember,
So over
always
here,
remember that just
whenever you want to control something, you will always be on the left side of the grid. But when you're operating out of love, you're on the right side of the grid. So whenever you want manifestation to take place, you have to be on the right side. So you cannot control a woman by using force.
always remember that just because nature wants men to control women, that no one should ever think that women are in any way inferior to men. Never. They are just different, and it is not enough for a man to say to himself, men are supposed to control women, and then proceed to beat his wife physically or mentally if she refuses to indulge his whimsicalness. Women are different from men emotionally and they have their own advantages which men cannot claim. For example, once a woman decides to do something and sets her mind to it, no force can dissuade her. Once an object is electrified, the electricity never leaves on its own. It must be drawn away. This explains why women are more passionate than men. They abandon themselves to their passion, they lose themselves in it. This is why I am never bothered when I find a spiritual aspirant who is obsessed with sex. It is a good sign. Once you can transfer that obsession to a deity, it will always pay dividends. After all, sex is just an attempt to return to the state of primordial unity. It is just misdirected. Once such aspirants are given the proper direction, they can achieve very quickly in a blitzkrieg. I have told you stories about Tulsi Das. Did you know that sex made him renounce the world? It happened this way. When he was a young man, he married a young beauty named Ratnavali, and he went mad with lust for her. He couldn't sleep at night unless he had slaked his lust with her at least once. She enjoyed this in the beginning, of course, but eventually she became tired of it and one day decided to take a break. She told him that she had to consider her obligations to her family and so needed to make a social call on her mother and sister for a day and a night. She left. That night, Tulsidas found himself unable to sleep without his usual sexual release. It did not take him long to become frantic with desire, and in the course of the night, he determined that he must have Ratnavali, or else he would surely die. The night was dark, rain cascaded down onto the insatiable Tulsidas as he careened through the town's muddied streets. Ratnavali's family lived across the river from Tulsidas, and the swollen torrent of the stream temporarily stopped his progress as he feverishly considered ways to cross over. It so happened that a corpse lay there on the riverbank waiting to be cremated. The rain had set in before its pyre could be built, and the mourners had to run to shelter to awake a drier moment to perform their duty to the deceased. Tulsidas's desperate brain saw the corpse as a suitable raft on which to cross the river, failing to register that it was indeed a dead body. Overjoyed at his good fortune, Tulsidas dragged his raft on into the water and begin wild paddling for the opposite shore. Once on the bank, he leapt ashore and flew towards Ratnavali's house. It was lightless with midnight. Knowing Ratnavali's room to be on the top floor, he grabbed a handy rope, knotted one end into a lasso, and looped it over an obliging tree branch, entirely oblivious to the fact that the rope was not a rope, but rather a large, very venomous, and thoroughly astonished snake. Into Ratnavali's room, Tulsidas catapulted. Embracing her out of her sleep, he had his way with her over her shame filled protests that her mother and sister would hear. Spent, he lay back, exhausted, soaking her bed. She spat at him disgustedly. Tulsidas, you came to me only to satisfy your lust. You crave my flesh and bones. If you had put as much emotion into worshipping Lord Ram as you have in longing for this impermanent body of mine, just think of what heights could have reached by now.
So this is the thing that even in the Gita, constantly Nagaji is also talking about, that you have to have a lux. If you create a lux for yourself, so Tulsidas was so obsessed by associating with his wife, that he lost sight of everything else. He was just fixed on the goal. So, like that, if you can fix your lux, if you can fix your goal in anything and be very, very determined and consistent in operating that, then there is nothing that is going to stop you from achieving what you want to achieve.
And Ratnavali, she was as good as a widow after that. She helped her husband.
You missed
Sorry,
a paragraph.
this barb embedded itself deeply in poor Tulsidas. All his sweet intoxication of passion and satiation evaporated instantly, and he replied, "Oh, is that so? Well, I'll show you." He left, noting in passing the corpse and the snake, amazed at the blindness which sex had engendered in him. He left his own home and wandered the world as a sadhu. He searched and eventually found Ram. And Ratnavali, she was as good as a widow after that. She helped her husband attain God and ruined her marriage in the bargain. She did not meet Tulsidas for several years. Once she finally located him, he told her, "You are my first guru. I must always respect you for pushing me onto the path that led to Ram. But now I have greater happiness with my Ram than I had with you. So please go back to your mother and sister."
So, spiritual happiness can never be compared to any kind of material happiness.
Here is a wonderful example of a lost opportunity. If Ratnavali had had subtle intelligence, she would have converted her husband's sexual energy into love for God by always seeing him as Shiva and always imagining herself to be Parvati. She would still have been his guru, fulfilling that Rinanu Bandhan, and he would still have achieved, perhaps after a longer time. But then both would have achieved, and what love they would have had for each other. But by being insulting, she lost everything. That's why I always say that the tongue and the penis can lift you to the heights or drag you down to the depths. It all depends on how you use them. The nature of sex. Why do people enjoy sex so much? It's such a filthy activity, putting flesh into flesh, lying in a pool of sweat, oozings, and discharges. Modern people explain it by saying this is the way. Nature ensures the survival of the species, but that is not an explanation. It is merely a restatement of the problem. How does nature overcome individuals with the desire to mate? Consider this: the ultimate foundation of all interpersonal relationships is cuddling and fondling. When a child is born, its parents cuddle and fondle it, creating in it the feeling that it is loved. When the child is older, it develops an attachment for a member of the opposite sex, which progresses from cuddling to fondling and culminates in the sex act. After marriage, some of the mystique of the romance between the two partners disappears. The solution? Produce a child, which the couple can cuddle and fondle. Once the child is grown and married, the couple will have their grandchildren to cuddle and fondle. All throughout life, there is nothing but this. When a man and a woman love each other, they always try to get closer and closer to one another. Separation is always painful, and they try to avoid it by spending all their free time together. This is why the word couple is singular in English, even though it means two. This feeling of separation is possible only because there is duality. The misery of separation is the misery of being unable to make the two, which were originally one, into one again. In the primal condition, there was no male and no female. When a man and a woman are really deeply in love, when the emotion is so strong that they are always mentally close, daydreaming about each other, imagining the next rendezvous, there comes a time when they can no longer resist the urge to be physically close to unite sexually. The tension builds up to the point where release is inevitable. It is a question of possession. I want to become you, and I want you to become me. This is impossible, the bodies get in the way. The next best thing is, I should be in you and you should be in me. When the couple is overwhelmed by the imperative to unite, they have sex. Actually, only the penis and vagina unite, but for the duration of the sex act, the man feels, yes, I have penetrated her, I have possessed her, and the woman feels, yes, I have accepted him. Into me, I have possessed him. I have always said that women are more possessive than are men, and that 99.99% of women are possessive. And whenever I say this, some woman objects. But look at physiology again. The vagina accepts the penis, not vice versa. The female is meant to possess, and the male is meant to feel that he is being possessed. Nowadays, of course, when everything is so topsy turvy, many men have become possessive, but this is pathological. It only happens because they are unsure of their own masculinity. Men are very worried about their sexual performance, the ability to make a woman feel that she is full. This fear of inadequacy makes them fear that their partners will have to go to other men to become satisfied, and they defend themselves by becoming possessive. But that is abnormal. It is normal for a woman to be somewhat possessive, and only the greatest women can go beyond it, just as only the greatest men can go beyond their image of themselves as great stud bulls who women are supposed to want to possess. Then, of course, you have Freud, who claimed that everything was due to penis envy. But that is another matter. Right now, let us consider the sex act. When the penis and the vagina unite, there is a great satisfaction in both partners. Possession, partial unity has taken place. This partial unity overwhelms them with the desire to attain to perfect unity, and they attempt to move their bodies even close together until their nervous systems overload and orgasm occurs. During the moment of orgasm, the two forget entirely their earthly existence, and for a brief moment, a very brief moment, they are again one. But only for the time the orgasm lasts. Afterward, they are again separate. Most
The
people
orgasm,
try.
the orgasm has been called a little death. Okay. Basically, what happens is that when you orgasm, you forget everything. You go into an altered state of consciousness for that moment of orgasm.
Most people try to convince themselves that they are satisfied with orgasmic sex, but they cannot. Even if you enjoy sex with real concentration, with real cooperation between the partners, the satiation will last for a week or two at the most, and then the desire will again rise. Of course, if you're chasing sex for the orgasm alone and not for the love, you will not be satiated even by copulating 10 times a day. You will end up a pervert. There is no escape. Orgasm is just a physical reflex. It causes no satisfaction on its own, just tension release. To really enjoy an orgasm, you must enjoy your partner. You must love your partner sincerely, and you must be more interested in his or her gratification than in your own.
So again, we come back to the position of what we read in Celestine prophecy. You give unconditionally, and the other person gives you unconditionally, and that is when the real power starts to rise. So it's the same thing over here. You need to look after your partner's needs, and your partner looks after your needs. So both are looking after. The jugalbandi starts, and things start to vibrate, which leads to an ultimate orgasm.
With ordinary sex between two partners who are fully receptive to each other's needs, satiation can't last for more than 2 weeks. But with Vajoli, see page 2279, a couple can enjoy themselves so fully in one sexual experience that for 3 months or more the sexual urge never rears its head. They feel so close to one another that there is just no need for the temporary closeness provided by an orgasm. There is real beauty in such a relationship. This is what the West has yet to learn. Sex is something which deserves a lot of time and effort to perfect, to make the effect unique and lasting.
So in
How many
Tantra
people
and
in
in
the world
Aghora,
really know about sex?
in Tantra and Aghora, the act is not important. The restraining within the act is what is important. So you do not have the orgasm, you internalize the orgasm. That's what Vajrodi is all about.
How many people in the world really know about sex? Oh, I know there are Masters and Johnson and so many other sexologists and dozens of books on the subject, but how many people have really become expert at sex? We Indians, only a few of us, are the only ones in the world who really know the spiritual erotic art. Westerners are doing plenty of research, but they have a long, long way to go. If they were to learn our techniques, they would be able to perform them very well because they are willing to try anything new. They have very few inhibitions left, in contrast to today's Indians who have plenty. But there is such a difference in the mentality of a Westerner and an Easterner. And sex is all in the mind, no matter what anyone tells you. Take prostitution as an example. A Western whore watches the clock very closely. Once your time is up, you must emit and depart. But here in India, suppose you try to climb on the lady too early. She will tell you, no, my lord, wait, the night is yet young. We have until morning to enjoy our play. If you fart in the bed of a Western whore, she will say, oh, you bloody stinking fellow. But an Indian girl would tell you, what a man you are. Even the gas you pass is melodious. Of course, this is the way things used to be. Indians are gradually becoming clock watchers under the influence of the West. Don't you think a man is more likely to perform well in response to a supportive and caring attitude rather than one which is strictly businesslike? I don't mean to say that Indian prostitutes have hearts of gold, far from it. They put on this act because they know it will help generate more revenue from the customer. Here in India, both get what they want. The man thinks he is being treated like a lord, and the lady gets paid for having a good time. And in the West, only business. We Indians are very emotional, and to trick us, you have only to play on our emotions. Westerners have become very clinical on the subject of sex. I read in the Time the review of a book written about the clitoris. Very nice, but inexact. Very few people in the world understand women's orgasms, and in the East, only about one tenth of 1% of women have any idea of what an orgasm is. In the West, at least 10% do because they all read the sex manuals and try out what they read, but they are still groping, they don't have a complete grasp of the subject. To begin with, they should forget all about quantity and should concentrate on quality. One good orgasm satisfying to both partners is worth 100 ordinary physical responses. For this, we must try to understand the true nature of sex. The Rinanubandhan of sex. In reality, there is nothing to sex but Rin Anubandhan. Freud was right to argue that sex instinct is inherent in all creatures, inborn in each one. But did he know why? Did he know that the sex instinct actually begins with the union of the sperm and the ovum because that is the sex act all its own, a union of male and female. Sexuality begins with the conception, and as soon as the child is born, it is aware of its sexuality. Doesn't the penis of a tiny infant become erect? Since erection occurs only when the ego self identifies with the penis. Ego awareness of sexuality must be present even in infancy. Two people can be mutually attracted to one another only if there was some relationship between them in a previous life. They may have been animals or insects or humans, but if they copulated, then they will be overwhelmed by the urge to copulate when they meet in this life. And just because they were mates or husband and wife in a previous existence, it does not always happen that they must be husband and wife in this life. They may come back as mother and son, father and daughter, or brother and sister, and then the result will be incest. In the past, these instincts were rigidly controlled by the rules of society, and those cases of incest which did occur were hidden deep. Today, everything is out in the open. Now, the person of subtle intelligence will be able to discover so many things about two people who copulate. For one, suppose it is a mother and her son who unite sexually. Does the mother make the son climb on her, or is it the son who initiates the activity? By knowing this, you can know who the male in the last encounter, in the last birth. Normally, the male is dominant. He first indicates his desire for sex, and then the female acquiesces. She will acquiesce only if there was a relationship between them in the past. She will be overcome by the urge developed during the previous liaison. If the female in this birth takes the initiative, she must have been the male previously. Even the posture taken during coitus is determined by that previous relationship. You know, I suppose, that camels and rhinos mate hind ways. The penis points backwards in these species. Each species has its own peculiarities of mating, and if you know all the possible wombs like a rishi does, the sex posture alone is sufficient to pinpoint the species involved in the previous relationship. This knowledge can be beneficial. Suppose I have knowledge of my previous births. I meet a girl I like and we go to bed together. Since I know the form we shed previously fish, bird, mammal, or whatever I will refer to my mental files and locate the sex techniques appropriate to that species and then deliberately initiate that technique. She and I will then instinctively enjoy that sex much more than we would have had we used any other posture because subconsciously we go back to our previous state, which makes the conscious mind drop away, which increases the passion. That sex will be so satisfying that Rinanubandhan is fulfilled completely by one session. My work is done. Another Rin is crossed off my list. The girl enjoys herself better than she has ever enjoyed before. No one is a loser. This is especially important because, as a male, I have the obligation to satiate my partner. To know the Rinanubandhan is to be able to decide how and when to fulfill it. If I know Shiva Swarodaya, the science of breath, I can deliberately inhale certain of my partner's breaths during a deep embrace, and she will never be able to leave me. When I know the Rinanu Bandhan is finished and it is time for our relationship to end, I will inhale certain other breaths and she will develop an aversion for me and we will split. It is as simple as that. She never knows what has happened. She thinks it is all her own volition that she came to me and that she left. She forgets that there is no such thing as free will. There comes a point, though, when sex becomes tiresome. How much can you perform the sex act anyway? You have to tire of it eventually. Suppose that a certain couple had enjoyed sex so much in a past birth that they were fully satiated. When they meet in this birth, they will have a desire for sex, but they will never be impelled to follow through on that desire. They must have a desire for sex together because they were related sexually in the past. It is axiomatic. But if they avoid sex in this birth, their relationship will become much more intense. Physical sex makes you more aware of your body, which weakens your mind. This makes you more interested in gratifying your body and makes it less likely that you'll remain faithful to one partner. When your relationship is purely or predominantly mental, though, there comes a point when you will be unable to do without your partner. The ties will be so strong. You'll never be tempted to look at anyone else because you know you'll never find anyone else to understand you so well. A peculiar sort of Maya. will bond the two of you together. Whenever you are apart, you will always long for the day when you will be reunited. You yearn for each other and to share your professions, your hobbies, your pastimes, and most of all, your sadhana. There is such a beautiful lingering memory that you can't bear separation, but there is almost no desire for sex because just a kiss or a hug or the touch of a hand is enough to satisfy. Isn't this better than repetitively going through the mere moanings and groanings of physical sex? Isn't this more refined? Like music, sex is an art, and you must be artistic if you hope to become good at sex. Everything in life should be artistic, in my opinion, otherwise, what is the use of living? This is the main grudge I have against Westerners. They are so crude and rough. It is because they are slaves to time, always in such a hurry to get things done that they have rarely have any time to do anything right with art, grace, and culture. And now the Westerners are spreading this disease all around the world. There have been any there has never been any other lover in the world like Lord Krishna, and there never again be like him. He had more than 16,000 wives, and every woman who saw him immediately fell in love with him and melted into him. When he lived among the cowherds of Vrindavan, he used to dance with the women of the village, the dance known as the Ras Leela. There is an esoteric meaning for this and every other event in Krishna's life. Of course, but besides that, an imitation of the Ras Leela has been performed as a folk dance of millennia here in India. A boy and a girl stand opposite one another, each holding a pair of slim sticks. They wheel and whirl, tapping the sticks together to the rhythm of the dance. Most intricate, fascinating to watch. But now the vulgar have made the music disco, and the children beat their sticks together violently. The last time I encouraged Ravi to join in, I thought he would be beaten soundly by the girl he was dancing with. She was that rough. Our society is regressing into barbarism. It's sad. Is it wonder that people have no time or interest for mere kissing and holding hands or lying together quietly side by side? Such development in a couple occurs only after many lives lived together. Today, people will not settle for anything less than sex, usually rough and violent sex, and even that fails to satisfy them. Marriage. Most people cannot get out of the Rinanu of sex, which is why society developed the institution of marriage. Originally, there was no such system as marriage here in India. People were more primitive, something like cavemen. If I wanted some woman, I would just go and take her, and no one could say anything about it. Shwetaketu changed all that. One day, Shwetaketu, his father Udalaka Rishi, and his mother were all sitting peacefully near their hut. A Brahmin walked up to his mother, said, "Come with me," and carried her away. Shwetaketu wanted to follow him and bring his mother back, but his father dissuaded him gently, saying, "Someday you will steal someone's wife yourself." Then Shwetaketu's young heart was so hurt that he vowed he would change society so that no children would ever again be so cavalierly deprived of their mothers. And so marriage came into being. Still, the ancient sacrament of marriage was nothing like what we have today. Back then, if a boy and girl decided to marry, they would go out alone together to a secluded place and would take the sun or the fire, the water, or any of the great elements as a witness. And that was it. From that time forth, they were man and wife. Plenty of rituals were added later by the priestly class to prolong the ceremony for the priest's benefit, but the sense of the rite is still the same. Every Vedic wedding today takes fire as a witness because no marriage is regarded as irrevocably solemnized until the couple takes 7 steps around the sacred fire. The true Vedics never consummated a marriage the day it took place, no matter how auspicious the wedding day might be. The bride would return home with her parents to wait for another auspicious day, so chosen that by copulating on that day, the couple would achieve such satisfaction that they would never think of leaving each other. Another advantage to the wait between the ceremony and the consummation was that both parties had time to prepare themselves mentally. The days they spent apart served to heighten their desire for each other from anticipation of the sex they would enjoy together. I have always said that 50% of the enjoyment of a romance lies in the waiting period, when you don't know whether the opposite party will fall in love with you or not. You can't be sure. You can't take anything for granted. You are on tenterhooks continuously. After you both know you love each other, part of the joy is lost, but part still remains. If I make a mistake, he or she might leave me. This keeps you always on your best behavior. But after marriage, you always have each other. You have ready sex whenever you want it, and your partner dare not leave you since society will point a finger if he or she does. The result: all the magic, the mystery, the danger disappears from the relationship, it becomes devitalized. And then there is nothing to do but endure it, or if you are an American, divorce. In India, we have known about human psychology for a long time, and this wait for the bride before the bride is taken to her husband's house is one means of making the marriage a success. Each day the longing would increase until both the bride and groom would be half mad with desire by the time the auspicious day rolled around. Then the bride would be decked out in beautiful sari and whatnot and would travel by stages to her husband's house. With her, she would carry a big silver glass filled with milk, 2 liters boiled down into one, mixed with almonds, pistachios, saffron, and so on. She would also bring 5 pans. Each pan would have an extra ingredients added to it, and each would be folded into a particular shape. After all the greetings and other formalities, which would be suitably prolonged to drive the newlyweds to distraction, the bride and groom would enter their nuptial chamber, and no one would disturb them until they emerged. The first pan would be square folded. Both would eat it together so their lips would meet in a kiss. That kiss, the first kiss of passion in their lives, would be prolonged, and when the young man would then look at his wife's lips, he would see them blood red because of the pan juice. And you know what red is to a bull. It intoxicates and excites him. People talk about kissing, but they don't have any idea about how many types of kisses there are. Let me tell you about 3 of them. The kiss of entanglement is a kiss on the lips, which is practiced by lovers or a husband and wife. It entangles you further and further in the mire of sex. The satanic kiss is a kiss on the eyes by a darkini or a pishach. This kiss makes you the, see the ethereal world, which will in all probability drive you insane. That is why it is satanic. When Ma kisses you, though, she will kiss you on the forehead at the location of your third eye, which she causes to open. This is the kiss of enlightenment, the kiss of true motherhood. And the day Ma gives you this kiss, you become filled with her divine intelligence. I think this is the best type of kiss, and after enjoying it, I will never feel like enjoying any other type of kiss. I want only her sweet lips. But most human beings insist on fleshly lips. Most human beings, unfortunately, have become so obsessed with sex that they have forgotten the beauty of a kiss. Forget coitus. Once you have kissed someone, once you have come so close to another being as to unite your mouths together, how can you forget that person? Isn't sex just the uniting of the lower mouths together? When someone has so totally surrendered to you as to open his or her body to you, Shouldn't you always remember that surrender? Most people don't do. They enjoy and forget. It goes to show that all sex today is directly solely by Rinanubandhan. Traditionally, though, a couple could experience a romantic kiss first on that night of consummation, and it would be the experience of a lifetime for them. The second pan was to be placed between the girl's breasts. The boy would take it with his mouth, using his tongue to excite the area, thus igniting the erotic centers of the upper body. Remember how the ancient Romans in their orgies used. Can we stop here, please?
No, third पान का complete करो.
To pour wine over the women's breasts and then lick it up. This is the same sort of thing.
Okay, so this was all about sex and the importance of sex.